Hello friends! Today I want to tell you a story that I find very interesting. This is a story about Magic the Gathering. This is a story about a very silly bird. And this is a story about why sometimes printing overpowered cards doesn't necessarily sell as much as you might expect. Before we get started properly, I'm gonna have to provide some context. Magic the Gathering is an old game. It's over 30 years old at this point. And in that time frame, there were a lot of very powerful cards that were printed. Now, let me make something clear. I am talking about tournament magic right now. I'm talking about the kind of magic where you try really, really hard and then go to tournaments and you try to win. That's what we're discussing today. And if it comes to that kind of magic, if you always just have access to all of the cards that were ever printed, then if Wizards of the Coast wants to sell new cards, they would have to constantly power creep the game. That makes sense, right? Because even if the old cards aren't good, there are just so many that have accumulated over the years that you simply have so many options for so many specific things that new cards will find it very difficult to compete unless they're very powerful. But of course, that's assuming the old cards aren't good. In many cases, old cards in Magic the Gathering tend to be very powerful because they didn't quite figure out balancing yet. Well, arguably, they haven't figured it out today yet either. This story could be about that, but I don't actually think it is. Now, their solution to this is to do something called a set rotation. This right here is the set rotation for Standard. So Standard is a format where players are playing with only the most recent cards. So you can only play cards from the last 2 or last 3 years, and anything older than that is not something you're allowed to play. The advantage of this is that Wizards of the Coast can print new cards and then have them be played in Standard. And even if those newer cards aren't necessarily stronger than what was printed before, because what was printed before will eventually rotate out, and then the newer cards will automatically see play. It's actually a pretty good system. It works for the players, they get to do new stuff, and it works for Wizards of the Coast because they get to sell new products. But Standard has a bit of a problem. Not everybody wants to play with a rotating format like this, right? Because it does require you to constantly always stay fully up to date with everything. And sometimes you also just want to play with the old cards. I mean, 30 years of Magic history, that's exciting. And so Magic the Gathering also has something called eternal formats. For example, Modern, which is what we're talking about today, is a format that started with the Mirrodin Besieged block, September 2003. In Modern, you're allowed to play any cards that were released for Magic the Gathering since September 2003, or since Mirrodin, right? So all of the cards since then. And if new cards get printed, and they get printed for Standard, then those are also automatically playable in Modern. You can just play with those, that is fine. Modern has the advantage that A, there's a giant card pool, which allows for a lot of creativity, but also B, you don't have to constantly update your decks, at least in theory, because again, the assumption is that the cards printed into Standard are a little bit worse, and so you will just kind of have your deck, and you might update it with 1 or 2 cards out of Standard, but not so much, not so frequently. But of course, for Wizards of the Coast, that is not necessarily ideal because Wizards of the Coast wants to sell products. They want to sell you cards. And that's why they invented Modern Horizons. Modern Horizons was the first product that Wizards of the Coast printed that was printed straight into Modern. What that means is it didn't go into the usual Standard rotation. It skipped Standard, but it was legal to be played in Modern, not in Standard, but in Modern. And what Wizards of the Coast said and what they did is we're going to print more powerful cards in this set because Modern is a higher power level than Standard. So Modern Horizons was really notorious for having a lot of very, very powerful cards in it. One of these was Hogaak, the Arisen Necropolis. Now, Hogaak is a really interesting card that we're not going to discuss in detail. Sorry. There's lots of content out there where you can read about Hogaak, but Hogaak is a bit of an old story. Hogaak was broken. Wizards of the Coast intended to print a powerful card, and that they did, but they made the card too powerful. And Hogaak kind of took over the competitive scene. While Hogaak didn't stomp his first tournament in the way that, he won the tournament, Hogaak was very, very popular at that tournament to a degree where it felt like you were either playing Hogaak or you were playing a deck to counter Hogaak. And those were really the only two styles of decks that existed. This was a problem because having one card completely dominate the field like that wasn't very fun for the players. But Wizards of the Coast also didn't want to just ban Hogaak, because if they ban Hogaak, then, that's one of the cards from Modern Horizons. They want people to buy Modern Horizons. They want people to be excited about Modern Horizons. So what they did instead is they banned a bunch of Hogaak's support pieces. They didn't ban Hogaak himself, but the cards that made him good. Interestingly, what happened then is that instead of Hogaak becoming worse, the professional players actually realized that the cards they were using with Hogaak were maybe not ideal, and they started digging. And again, Modern has a really large card pool, over 20 years of history there, and they found a new list, a new deck for Hogaak that was widely considered to be even better than the original one. And then eventually Hogaak did get banned. And this is how Wizards of the Coast handles balancing Modern. I should probably also say that. If a card is too strong, what they do is they say you're no longer allowed to play it. It is banned. Hogaak is banned. You're not allowed to play Hogaak. Now, over the years, Wizards of the Coast has done more of this stuff. They've done more sets that were printed straight into Modern. Because there is one huge advantage of doing this for them, which is, of course, that every time they release a Modern Horizons set, Modern kind of rotates a little bit. It doesn't, technically speaking, rotate in the way Standard does, but because the Modern Horizons sets are so powerful, Wizards of the Coast kind of forces Modern players to play with the Modern Horizons cards. So they did Modern Horizons 2, then they did the Lord of the Rings set, and now, most recently, they've released Modern Horizons 3. And that's exactly what happened. Modern Horizons 3 released, there were lots and lots of very powerful cards in it, and people started playing primarily with those. Currently, if you look at the Modern metagame, you will see a ton of Modern Horizons 3 cards. And of course, also a lot of cards from Modern Horizons 2 and Modern Horizons 1. That brings us to Nadu. This is Nadu, the silly bird. This is Nadu Winged Wisdom. This is one of the cards printed in Modern Horizons 3. Now, Nadu is a card that I thought was really interesting from the very moment it was announced, because this was a card that kind of gaslit the Magic the Gathering community purely by its existence. We're going to have a look at what this card does in detail in a moment, but immediately, all players that looked at this, everybody that looked at this was like, this card is so broken that I don't believe I properly understand it. That was the community-wide response. It was really interesting. So many people were just like, this card is so obviously overpowered that there gotta be some sort of mistake here. Like, I am making a mistake. Maybe the spoiler or like the announcement was a mistake. Maybe there's just something going wrong right now. This card doesn't make sense. So let's deconstruct it, because it turned out to be real. It does work this way. Nadu Winged Wisdom is a 3-mana creature. So you play it on the board, it's a creature. Legendary creature, bird wizard, don't worry about that. Flying, doesn't matter. Who cares? Creatures you control have. Whenever this creature becomes the target of a spell or ability, reveal the top card of your library. If it's a land card, put it onto the battlefield. Otherwise, put it into your hand. This ability triggers only twice each turn, and then it's a 3/4. So let's deconstruct this. This is going to take a moment, but let's have a look at what Nadu really does. Let's start from the bottom, right? Let's go from the bottom up. First of all, this ability only triggers twice each turn. This is a pretty common stopgap that Wizards of the Coast have been using pretty frequently recently, where they make it so that creatures have powerful effects, but they can only trigger once each turn. Immediately, Nadu stands out, because Nadu doesn't say once each turn, Nadu says twice each turn, which is very strange, the only card that does that. However, Nadu is a liar. You might think Because this says this ability triggers only twice each turn, that this ability can only trigger twice each turn. But Nadu says creatures you control have and then gives them a giant block of text. So Nadu gives all of your creatures this entire block of text, which means this ability triggers only twice each turn, applies for every single creature that you control. Because Nadu gives all of your creatures this block of text, and the block of text says only twice each turn. But twice each turn for this creature. Cool. Whenever this creature becomes the target of a spell or ability, this is the condition. So what we have to do is we have to target creatures with spells or abilities. Importantly, this again isn't restricted. Oftentimes this would be restricted by either saying whenever you target it or when your opponent targets it. In some way it would be restricted. But it isn't. Nadu triggers when you do something and when your opponents do something. So either one can do it. It's also important that it's spell or abilities. So that means that Nadu triggers off of anything that can basically point at him or the other creatures that also have this effect. As long as something points at him, this effect happens. So what's the effect? You reveal the top card of your library. Then, if it's a land card, you put it onto the battlefield. Otherwise, put it into your hand. There are, again, two interesting things here because there are two stopgaps missing. If it's a land card, put it onto the battlefield. There are lots and lots and lots of effects in Magic the Gathering that put land cards onto the battlefield. This is not a rare effect. However, the absolute vast majority of them say, put it onto the battlefield tapped. What does that mean? Tapped lands are lands you can't immediately use. And lands are your resources. They are your mana. You see at the top right how Nadu costs 3 mana to cast. That means you need 3 lands. Let's just keep it simple for now. You need 3 lands and you need 3 untapped lands. Usually, when you have a card that says put a land onto the battlefield, that land will enter tapped. And that will then delay your usage of that land for 1 turn. If a land enters untapped, that means you can immediately use it for mana. And that's another thing about Nadu that's weird. His ability makes lands enter untapped. Okay. Otherwise, put it into your hand. That's the last thing here. Normally, you would expect Nadu to draw a card otherwise. But he doesn't. He puts it into your hand. So let's have a look at what else exists in Modern. Modern is a format that is dominated by a bunch of really powerful cards, but they are like kind of staples. You can expect them. So here are just some examples. There are lots more that I could pull, but let's use these as examples. We've got Lightning Bolt, we've got Orcish Bowmasters, and a little bit Sheoldred the Apocalypse. Nadu dodges all of this. These are the cards that kind of keep Modern in check. Because let's have a look at these. Lightning Bolt is really simple. It says deal 3 damage to any target. So what Lightning Bolt does is it's great at just killing a creature, particularly kind of cheaper creatures that have powerful effects. That's pretty common that a creature will be cheap in terms of stats and then will have a powerful effect, but then they have low stats. Sorry, they will be cheap in mana and they have a powerful effect, but they will have low stats. Orcish Bowmasters is a great example of this. It's a 2 mana creature with a great effect, but it's only a 1/1. Lightning Bolt is kind of the card that just when your opponent tries to do some shenanigans, you just Lightning Bolt the creature and you kill it. But let's have a look at Nadu. Nadu is a free 4 HP, meaning Lightning Bolt doesn't kill it. That's a huge deal. But it goes further. This is Orcish Bowmasters. Orcish Bowmasters is one of the best cards in Modern. Arguably the best card. Well, not anymore. But anyway, Orcish Bowmasters, they are amazing. It's an amazing, incredibly powerful card. What Orcish Bowmasters does is when Orcish Bowmasters enters, it shoots a damage at something. And then also whenever your opponent draws an extra card. So during your turn, you automatically draw a card, right? Orcish Bowmasters doesn't trigger there. But whenever you draw any card aside from that initial one, Orcish Bowmasters will shoot another damage at something. So Orcish Bowmasters is great at stopping your opponents from just going wild. Basically, if your opponent has some way to draw 20 cards, then you can play Orcish Bowmasters and say, if you draw 20 cards, I will just shoot you 20 times into the face. But here's where Nadu comes in again. Nadu has no draw effect. Nadu puts the card into your hand. And yes, that is different. That counts differently. Similarly, if you look here in the top right corner, there's Sheoldred, the Apocalypse, a very powerful card, which says whenever the opponent draws a card, they lose 2 lives. So it's another way to kind of like stop your opponent from drawing too many cards. And because of these 2 cards, drawing is actually kind of considered to be a little bit of a weaker effect in Modern. And Nadu completely bypasses these safety measures that exist in Modern. It's also funny because Lightning Bolt and Orcish Bowmasters together could be used to kill Nadu, right? They do have a combined damage output of 4. But Nadu can trigger twice each turn, not just once. Because Nadu can trigger twice each turn, even if you were to do that, even if your opponent plays a Nadu and you immediately respond by just shooting Nadu with both a Lightning Bolt and an Orcish Bowmaster, then Nadu will still trigger his effect twice. So what do I do with Nadu? Now we know what Nadu does and why Nadu is so powerful, right? Well, what does Nadu do? Oh, sorry, I should also mention this. So the One Ring, right? This is like an incredibly powerful draw effect, an incredibly powerful card in Modern that exists where you just kind of like, you rely a lot on this to like draw cards and be really strong. This is considered to be like arguably the single most powerful card in Modern. But again, this is a card that's kept in check by Orcish Bowmasters and Sheoldred. So this card, which is widely considered to be like the most powerful card, arguably the most powerful card, it still has to deal with these 2 like problems, right? But Nadu doesn't. Okay, so what do I do with Nadu? Well, there are a couple of cards that you can use to combo with Nadu. I'm only going to explain like kind of the basic combo, and I also have a video example for you. So there are 3 cards sort of that we need for this. We need a Springheart Nantuko, we need a Shuko, and we need a land, ideally a fetch land. Let's start with Shuko. Shuko is a terrible card. It is not good. This card has existed for nearly 20 years and has never seen any play anywhere. It is just not a good card. But Shuko has some unique properties. First of all, it is a 1 mana equipment. So you just kind of play it and then you can attach it to a creature and then it gets the effect. But the effect is useless. Who cares? But it's cheap. 1 mana is important. There are a variety of reasons why 1 mana is important. Just trust me, it's important. It makes it easier to get this onto the battlefield for a variety of reasons. But Shuko also has Equip 0. Equip 0 means that you can take Shuko and activate it to equip it to a creature for no mana cost, for no cost at all. And what's important here, this is an ability. Remember, Nadu also triggers off of abilities. Usually you would expect that an effect like Nadu's to only trigger off of spells, which require resources to be played. But Shuko has an Equip 0. If you have a Shuko in play, you can attach it to Nadu, and then you can just attach it to Nadu again, and you get 2 triggers at no cost. Because you can just kind of keep using that. And of course, if you have more creatures, you can just keep moving the Shuko around. Shuko doesn't have a cooldown, 0 cost. You can just like equip it to Nadu, then equip it to something else, equip it back to Nadu, equip it to something else, equip it to a 3rd creature. You can just keep moving it and use it to trigger Nadu over and over again. Then we have Springheart Nantuko. Springheart Nantuko is also a Modern Horizons 3 card. There's a lot of text on there. That text is important, but not for what I'm trying to explain right now. So, what Springheart Nantuko basically does is it's a 1/1 creature, but whenever you play a land, you get another 1/1 creature. And you can do that as often as you want in a turn. So I play a land, I get a creature. Great. And then we have Misty Rainforest. This is a land that we use to trigger Springheart Nantuko, and this is a so-called fetch land, which is great because what it does is it basically can be sacrificed to bring another land in. So it doesn't increase your mana pool, it doesn't give you like 2 mana, but it brings 2 lands, which is important for the Springheart Nantuko because that means you get to trigger it twice. So you have Nadu in play. Nadu triggers whenever you use an ability on one of your creatures. You have Springheart Nantuko in play, you have Shuko in play. You activate the Shuko onto your Nadu. Your Nadu triggers, you get to check the top card of your deck. Let's say it's a land. You put the land into play, Springheart Nantuko triggers, you get a 1/1 creature. So now you have 5 more Nadu triggers, right? Because I can do it 1 more on Nadu, and then I can do it 2 more times on the Springheart Nantuko, and then 2 more times on the insect that I just spawned. If within those 5 Nadu triggers, I get another land, I get another insect, which then means I get 2 more Nadu triggers. Anytime Nadu doesn't put a land into play, I instead draw a card, but that's good too, right? There's lots of stuff we can do with drawing cards, although it's not actually drawing a card. So I've got a little clip for you, because I wanted to show you what this looks like. So if you look at this board state, you can see both of these players are playing Nadu. Down here is the board we're looking at. Ignore this up here, this doesn't matter. Just look down here, right? So you can see that Jason here has barely anything on the board. It's not super intimidating, right? There isn't all that much going on. So let's have a look at what can happen with a board this sparse with Nadu. So Nadu comes into play, and then a Shuko comes into play. And all we've got is a Nadu, a Shuko, and another creature, which is just some wiener. It's just a tiny, tiny creature that doesn't much. This is the assembly line. So first trigger, we get a land into play. Second trigger, we draw a card into our hand. Third trigger, we get another card into our hand. And then the fourth trigger, let's see what we get here. Another card into our hand. So not super exciting so far, but keep in mind that that was just by playing the most basic things. But we're not done yet, because of course your deck has many, many support pieces. It has lots and lots of things that you can do to make this more effective. So for example, what we're going to see Jason do here in a moment is, first of all, get a new land, get a Dryad Arbor. Dryad Arbor is an interesting creature because it's also a land, so you can get it with the fetch lands, but that means you can target it with the Shuko. So now we've got 2 more Nadu triggers, because Nadu counts for every single creature that you control. So there's the first Nadu trigger. Perfect, we got a land. That's a special land because it comes into play with a creature. And then we've got something else. Who cares? Got 2 more Nadu triggers. Another land. Perfect. That gives us another creature because it's another one of those special lands that comes into play with a creature. But Nadu counts for everything you got. And then here we go. We're going to go ahead and use all of our creatures that we have assembled right now to do a so-called code of coding, which lets us search out a creature out of our deck. The Nadu deck plays lots and lots of cards like this that allow you to just kind of like assemble the combo that you're looking for, to find the pieces that you need. And then we get the Springheart Nantuko. So now the Springheart Nantuko is here. And with the Springheart Nantuko out, we're going to keep going with the Nadu assembly line. Another Springheart, we don't really care. And there we go, another thing. Who cares? Look at that. We get so many things, but here is another land. Land comes into play, we get another creature. And that means we get 2 more triggers, right? So we're just going to keep going. And this is all off of a single, just kind of like single Nadu with a tiny board state. And then there's now more creatures in play, right? We got a land into play, so we got ourselves the Springheart Nantuko trigger. We play another Springheart Nantuko, and now we're just kind of looking for another land, because if we get another land, then that means we get 2 more things. Yeah, there we go, and our opponent concedes. Now, our opponent concedes at this point because we have a million ways to kill them. This is something I haven't explained yet. I've just kind of focused on the value engine, but just trust me, the details aren't really that important. That once you have this set up, what Jason could do is just search through the entire deck, play pretty much anything that is in there, because you're generating more mana than you're using up in resources, and then blow up everything that Sam had and just leave Sam without any way to actually win the game, and the next turn just smack him. All right, so that's what Nadu does. This was a clip from the most recent Pro Tour, so top level event. Pro Tour Modern Horizons 3, the first tournament with these new cards. And this is the top 8 of that tournament. What you can see here are the decks that people were playing. And I'm going to go ahead and just ignore the colors for now. We can see we've got one player playing Necro Dominance, then Nadu, Nadu, Control, Nadu, Nadu, another Necro Dominance, Nadu. 5 out of the top 8 decks were all playing Nadu. Nadu was completely dominating the competition. Nadu was I think at 27% of all decks were Nadu decks. And out of those, Nadu had a 59% win rate, which is huge. And, and in the top 4, so this is top 8, right? 5 out of the top 8 decks were Nadu decks. 4 out of the top 4 decks were Nadu decks. That's crazy. That is absolutely insane. So Nadu is dominating Modern right now more than Hogaak ever did. So what do we do with that information? Well, why does Wizards of the Coast print an overpowered card like this, right? Keep in mind what I said at the beginning. People were kind of gaslighting themselves into thinking that Nadu was worse than they initially assumed because Nadu was just like so obviously overpowered. But it turns out, no, Nadu was that obviously overpowered. That's just it. Nadu was just broken. The card is just absolutely stupidly overpowered. Okay, that is interesting, right? What do we do with this information? Like, that is very strange. Well, what do we do with this information? Why does Wizards want this, right? If the card is so blatantly overpowered that everybody could tell immediately, do we now assume that Wizards of the Coast are stupid, that they didn't notice this? And I think that would be foolish. I mean, obviously, Wizards of the Coast knew that Nadu was overpowered, but they wanted to print an overpowered card. Why do they want to print an overpowered card? Well, to sell products. So this right here is Flage, Titan of Fire's Fury. The Flage is also from Modern Horizons 3. And you can see here, Flage started out at around 10 euros because it's a mythic rare card, so it's kind of hard to get your hands on. But as people played more and more with Flage, they realized that Flage is super good. This is a super powerful card. And since then, Flage has just been kind of rising constantly in its value. So Flage is, you can currently, the cheapest Flage I could buy with these settings right here, which are pretty normal card market settings, is for around 45 euros. For one of these guys. I luckily already have one. I got lucky. I got mine much like right at the beginning. But anyway, so that's besides the point. I still feel really smug about that. I actually managed to buy my Flage when at literally the lowest price I've ever seen on card market for Flage. But anyway, setting that aside. So a Flage is really powerful, right? And people are buying Flage for their decks because he is so powerful, because they want to play with him. And that is good for Wizards of the Coast, right? Because another way to get Flage is to open booster packs and find him there. And that makes it so people are more inclined to buy booster packs. If cards are valuable, that directly benefits Wizards of the Coast. So why is Nadu crashing? Look at this. This is from today. So this is from today. Nadu after the Pro Tour, and I was paying attention to this during the Pro Tour because I found it to be really interesting. During the Pro Tour, I saw more and more and more Nadus coming onto card market to be sold with lower and lower prices. This is super strange. This is not what you would expect, right? Flage is going up. Flage is going up. Nadu is going down. Okay, why is Nadu going down? That's bizarre, right? If we think, let me give you a different example, right? There was, as a while ago, so I don't have nice graphs like this for it, but a little while ago, there was a tournament where a player, pioneered, yeah, it was a pioneer tournament, anyway, where a player showcased a vampire deck that wasn't heard of before, and it was incredible, super successful, it crushed the competition. It used 2 cards that were widely considered to be like fine, but in the specific deck, in the specific combination, they were incredibly powerful. And as a result, those 2 cards immediately shot up in price, right? They like quadrupled how much they cost. But that's not what's happening with Nadu. Nadu had an absurd tournament, arguably the most dominant tournament that we've ever seen, at least in recent years. And he's crashing in price. How does that make sense? Doesn't that go against everything we just learned? With Wizards of the Coast, they want cards to be good. They want Modern to kind of be a rotating format so people buy into it. And at the same time, we know that this card is absolutely overpowered. It dominated a tournament and it's crashing in price. Well, I have a theory, and so does the tournament winner of the Pro Tour.
So, yeah, I don't know. I mean, this deck is just crazy stupid, and I'm glad I got to play it before it's gone, because it's gonna be gone. Do not invest. Oh, right, no, invest in all my Shugos.
You'll sign.
So, the tournament winner,
yeah, I don't know.
The champion of the tournament believes that this deck isn't going to stick around. And I agree. Something has got to change, right? Because Nadu showcased that it is just that overpowered. It is as blatantly overpowered as people assumed it would be. But somehow that play seems to not have worked out for Wizards of the Coast. And instead, people are now assuming and gambling on Nadu getting banned. And that puts Wizards into this really weird scenario. We have seen this before with Hogaak. That's why I brought up Hogaak earlier. When Hogaak was overpowered, Wizards of the Coast didn't ban Hogaak. They banned his support pieces. And when they banned his support pieces, the pro players then just went and found an even better deck for him. And eventually they banned him anyway. But for that period of time, Modern just wasn't... People weren't happy. Let's just put it that way. Nadu is even stronger than Hogaak. And Nadu has outperformed Hogaak because this tournament that we just looked at had, similarly to Hogaak's tournament, a large population of players that were specifically building to counter Nadu. And they lost. They couldn't do it. Top 4 was 100% Nadu. So where does that leave Wizards of the Coast now? If they don't ban Nadu, and instead they take out some of his support pieces like Shuko or the Springheart Nantuko, then, well, okay, it's so obvious then that obviously they're just trying to not ban the overpowered cards. But the assumption, and this is a fair assumption, is that it would be incredibly trivial to find a different deck in which Nadu could pop off, because Nadu is just so blatantly overpowered, right? Nadu would probably be blatantly overpowered if you literally just played him as a 3/4 creature to attack with, because he is so difficult to remove, and even if you remove him, you need to use multiple cards, which also give your opponents multiple triggers of the effect, so you just kind of... it puts you so far behind that it's basically impossible to come back from. But people won't do that. People will find a different way to abuse its effect to build these combo lines, to build these combo decks. So have Wizards of the Coast cornered themselves? Did they want to make an overpowered card to push up prices, but they went a step too far and now it's pushing them down? Isn't that fascinating? I think that's so interesting, and I can't stop thinking about it. And I hope you found this interesting. That's it. That's the conclusion to this video. I hope this was something that you found appealing. Yeah, I find Magic the Gathering really interesting, and this is just something that's happening right now that I can't get out of my mind. So yeah. Anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and we'll see if Nadu ever ends up getting banned, or if something else gets taken out of the game first. Personally, I think Wizards of the Coast, they're just gonna pull the plug on Nadu. It makes the most sense to me. Instead of trying to salvage the Nadu situation, what I would do is I would just say, okay, let's get rid of Nadu really quickly, and if we get rid of Nadu, then people will focus on all of the other good cards on Modern Horizons, like, for example, Flage, and keep pushing those prices up, and they will continue making money that way. But it's kind of interesting too, isn't it? Like how that's the way they have to think. Like sometimes you don't design to make the best game possible, but the most monetizable. And I would like to say that that's a shame, but it's just kind of the reality, right? The reality of it. It's just what you gotta do sometimes. Anyway, that's it. I'll see you guys. Goodbye.